you. So we now move to the next item on the agenda, which is 7C, 29 Fernlea Close, and there are no registered speakers on this item, as I understand it. So, Mr. Collins, would you like to give your presentation for this item?
Thank you, Chair. This is another application which was deferred from the last meeting. The case officer has summarised the responses to the two concerns which led to that deferral in paragraphs 0.1 and 0.2 of her report. Essentially, the responses are that the highway authority is satisfied with the parking layout, and the case officer has suggested a condition to ensure that that is in place before occupation of the extension. And as far as the use of the building as a house of multiple occupation is concerned, clearly the applicant in this case has stated that it would not be, but we have to be clear that a Class C4 HMO with 6 or fewer unrelated people in it can be created from a Class C3 dwelling without the need for planning permission, so that could take place without any requirement for further planning permission. If there were to be more than 6 people, it would be a sui generis HMO, and that would be a change of use which would require planning permission.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. So, any members wish to comment? Councillor Dryden.
I just say that I brought this one to committee because the neighbours in the area were concerned, because also it's not on the planning because they had I think there's 3 or 4 bedrooms up in the roof space as well now, which obviously don't need planning. It was done anyway. You can see on the back there how high it was, and that's the only reason I brought it up, with the neighbours' concerns of 6 or 7 bedrooms in the house already, and the traffic, the vehicles parked. Looking at this now, I can't vote against it, but I don't think I can vote for it though either, because it's just, in my opinion, overdeveloped.
Mr. Collins, would you like to respond?
Only to say that I note Councillor Dryden's concern. Obviously, the potential for this building to be turned into a sui generis HMO is something that we would need to be vigilant about.
Thank you. Any further comment from members? Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, my concern was about the parking that was brought up before. I mean, it just says a condition is attached to ensure parking layout. If we're going to have 7 bedrooms there, which is 7 cars, how do you get 7 cars on that property? Because if you can't get 7 cars on that property, the road is already blocked up. So where do those cars go? Or do you put something on to say you can't have more than 3-4 cars on the for that property? And if you cannot do that, I'm concerned about, like I say, the parking on Fernlea Close, which is, like I say, bad at present.
There's 2 difficulties about that, Chair. The kind of condition that Councillor Ashton is suggesting about numbers of vehicles would be impossible to enforce, and therefore would be contrary to government guidance about conditions. It's obviously possible to assess how many people are living in a dwelling, although that's fairly difficult, but to assess how many cars are involved is impossible because you've got no idea where they are likely to be parked, and I can confirm that officers would be unable to enforce that condition. If committee is considering refusing the application on the basis of parking space, I think it has to bear in mind that the parking standards in the 2006 plan are expressed as maxima, and therefore it is quite difficult to justify a reason for refusal on the basis that there is not sufficient parking spaces provided on site. There have been instances where area committees have done that in other places, and the decisions have been reversed on appeal. It's obviously committee's decision, but I have to say that justifying that reason for refusal as appeal is quite a difficult thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Any further comment? Councillor Biggers.
I too share Councillor Drayton's concern of overdevelopment of one property. If you have already 6 bedrooms in a small dwelling and you're building a couple more, that's definitely is not a family. Is there a way of us refusing? Can you find a legal or planning reason why you can refuse that? But you know, it's very difficult for me to support something which is going to be overdeveloped. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
It is obviously possible to refuse an application on the basis that it represents overdevelopment, but that's got to be related to policies in the local plan. They need to, the reason for refusal would need to specify exactly what was the impact and which policies it fell under that you felt this would create. Given that the building cannot accommodate more than 6 unrelated people without becoming a sui generis HMO, which would require planning permission in its own right, you would be saying that for the building to have 6 people in it would represent overdevelopment. Now, any semi-detached house in any street in the city could have 6 people in a family in it without requiring any kind of permission of any sort at all. So it is very difficult to demonstrate that you think 6 people in this building represents overdevelopment, and I can't immediately see how you could tie that to a policy in the local plan.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I think we would have to be very clear about our reasons if we were to go against the officer's recommendation. Councillor Ryan.
At the moment, I think there's 6 bedrooms in there. Then there's probably going with the extension another 2 more. So you've got 8 bedrooms. So it just. The only real answer that I can provide to that is that you could add an informative reminding the applicant about the rules about sui generis HMOs. The point is, if it's not an HMO, then adding bedrooms to it doesn't involve any kind of permission being required other than for the space involved. If you feel that the mass of the building in itself is too great, then that really needs to be a refusal on the basis of policy 3.4, which is that it's not well integrated with the locality. I have to say that I think the mass of the building on its own would be difficult to defend as a reason for that kind of refusal, because there are many examples of semi-detached houses expanded on this kind of scale around the city.
Do you know how many beds there are in each room? Has anybody been inside that particular place? Are there 4 beds in each bedroom, for example? If there are 6 bedrooms currently, how many beds are in each bedroom? How many people do really reside there?
The answer to that, Chair, is no, because the application is not being made for an HMO. It's being made for physical extensions to the building, and therefore the number of beds that there are in any room is not relevant to the application. If members, have concerns that we don't have all the necessary information about this building and the way it's being used, or that it's being used in a way other than is suggested in the application, it's obviously something that I can take up with the enforcement team, but it doesn't really form a reason for refusing this application.
Councillor Avery.
So we don't have any information about use, do we? Just have suspicions based on numbers of bedrooms and I suppose a history of similar buildings going a similar way. But from what you're saying, we haven't got any planning grounds. notwithstanding the suspicions that there may be, and if it's not this owner, it might be the next owner, I suppose, could be the way that it might go. But at the time, from what you're saying, we have to wait until there are 8 people living there with 16 cars, and that unfortunately is the way it works.
It isn't possible to refuse a planning application on the basis of things that you think might happen if it is approved. It is up to the council to be vigilant about those possible events and, if necessary, to take the appropriate enforcement action.
Did you want to speak?
Well, Mr. Collins just gave us the reason I came here now, 3.4.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I would give.
Yeah. It's not in line with the rest of the locality,
Yeah.
3.4.
Chair, if members are minded to refuse the application on the basis of policy 3.4, can I ask that you be a little bit more precise about the aspects of the proposal you feel are in conflict with it? If you'd like me to read you what policy 3.4 says, I'm happy to do so.
I think we'd find that helpful, please, if you're able to do that for us.
Okay. There's 2 policies that you might want to consider. One is 3.4 and the other is 3.14. Policy 3.4 says developments will be permitted which demonstrate they've responded to their context and drawn inspiration from the key characteristics of their surroundings to create distinctive places. Such developments will identify and respond positively to existing features of natural, historic or local character on and close to the proposed development site. B, be well connected to and integrate with the immediate locality in the wider city. And C, have used the characteristics of the locality to help inform the siting, massing, design and materials of the proposed development. Now, I would suggest that if you want to use that as a reason for refusal, you're going to have to suggest that some part of the massing of the extension that's proposed here is something which is going beyond or jarring with the character of the immediate surroundings. If I go on to policy 3.14, which is about extending existing buildings, it says the extension of existing buildings will be permitted if they reflect or successfully contrast with their form, use of materials and architectural detailing, do not unreasonably overlook, overshadow or visually dominate neighbouring properties. C, retain sufficient amenity space, bin storage, vehicular access and car and cycle parking. And D, do not adversely affect listed buildings or their settings, the character and appearance of conservation areas, gardens of local interest, trees or important wildlife features. Now, it seems to me that the only element of that policy which your discussion so far has pointed to is the question of car parking. And obviously you can make that a part of your reason for refusal, but you do have to bear in mind that given the City Council's parking standards are maximums, you will have to have a very robust explanation of why the car parking in this instance is unacceptable.
Any further comment from members? Mr. Councillor Moore.
We all have our strong suspicions, but it doesn't look as if we can do very much about them. If this person appeals, there's very little grounds, it would seem, for us to stand.
Well, I think you've identified 2 elements of the proposal that you could test through the appeal route if you wanted to. One is the question of whether there's adequate car parking, and the other is whether the sheer mass of the extensions proposed here are contrary to the character of the area. My view is that both of those 2 are difficult to defend, but it's committee's choice whether they wish to do them.
Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, it's the sheer mass. If you go down Fernlea Post, if this is completed, it will be so much, shall we say, out of character with the rest of Fernlea Close. So when we're talking about fitting in with the surroundings and not affecting it, this one will stick out like a car bunker because it's got to be that big. It's a side extension, a front extension, a rear extension. If you could point out on Fernlea Close other properties that have got that kind of extensions and that kind of mass that's been built on it, then I could quite happily say, fair enough, we've approved that kind of over that scheme in the past, but for me, I think this one, the first one on Fernlea Close, where we're actually saying you can build that much on it. Again, as we've said before, once you've done that, then other neighbours go, guess what? They've got that, we'll build on and that much as well. So I hear what my councillor says about appeals and losing it, but sometimes we have to try and say, yeah, I have to draw a line in the sand, and this time, to me, this is overbearing on Fernlea Close. It does not fit in with the character of the rest of that close.
Councillor Dryden.
Well, just to go back again, I mean, overbearing, an 8-bedroom house in a predominantly 2 and 3 bedrooms, and that road.
I personally think this is a very, very difficult one, and I totally take on board what you're saying, that it may be difficult to actually defend and give very strong reasons in an appeal, but I also take note of ward councillors who know the area very well and know the situation of the house. I think it is a very difficult one. Any further comments? Councillor Moore.
The financial risks to the council of this case, I take it, are not great, because it would be a simple yes or no from the appeal officer should it go to appeal. Is that right?
It would depend slightly which route of appeal the applicant chose, but yes, I think essentially the risk here is that a different decision would be given, that's all. Again, I mean, I have to make a sort of informal judgment about whether there's any likelihood of the council being seen as unreasonable in this decision. I think if you provide a genuine reason for refusal and we can demonstrate the concerns that led to that reason for refusal, I think it would be quite difficult to support a claim for costs against the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Can we then consider a vote on a refusal on the grounds that we've discussed already, which was the 3.4 of the local plan and I think it was 3.14? Yeah. Mr. Collins, yeah.
Chair, would you like me to give you a first kind of draft of what I think you want to do on this?
I think we'd welcome it, yes.
Right. What I suggest is something like, because of the additional massing created by this proposal, the resulting building would respond poorly to existing features of local character and be poorly integrated with the immediate locality, contrary to Policy 3.4 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2006.
That's what I was thinking.
I think we'd be very grateful for your professional advice on that. Yeah, thank you. And that wording sounds great to me. Councillor Blackwell.
Just to say, do we want to throw in 3.14 with the concerns about the car parking?
Yeah.
As well as.
Yeah.
As well as.
That was our concerns last time, right?
Yeah.
And about the car parking as well.
I would suggest framing that as a second reason, if you want to add that as well, which would simply be the application does not provide appropriate on-site car parking, and you have to cite policy 8.10 of the local plan as the reason for that. If it is refused for that reason, and if there is an appeal, I think officers might want to come back to you for some assistance in exactly how you would want us to defend your concerns about the level of car parking given the council's standards. What you will need to do is to identify the special circumstances of this site which lead you to say that car parking of a level within the council's maxima is not appropriate.
Councillor President.
Just as a rule of thumb for the parking, usually every 3 bedrooms you have 1 vehicle, and so obviously if they're having 6 bedrooms you will expect a couple of vehicles, and if they're going to have 8 bedrooms, and I'm also based into that planning permission we gave last week. For 10 flats we gave 7 car spaces, so it's kind of a rule of thumb is half of what they're building is a requirement.
Mr. Collins, do I understand that it's going to be harder to justify the decision of refusal on the parking because we've got to provide special reasons why we're not going with the ordinary standard?
Chair, Policy 810 says off-street car parking must be in accordance with the parking standards. The car parking standards start in paragraph 1.1 by saying the standards set out in this document define the maximum levels of car parking that Cambridge City Council as a local planning authority will permit for various types of development. These levels should not be exceeded but may be reduced where lower car use can reasonably be expected. So really what you would need to do would be to have a strong argument that lower car use cannot reasonably be expected on this site. Now, normally the way of justifying that is to say that the site is a long way from local services or not well placed for public transport routes or cycle routes into the city. Now, this site is reasonably well placed for local services, so I think you're going to have to do it on the basis of the other arm, which is that the nature of transport links is such that people are likely to use cars. Obviously, the thing that would help you in that respect is that it's a long way from the city centre, and that may be the angle that you would want to use. I would be very careful indeed about trying to use rules of thumb about how many cars we should expect from an individual or a number of rooms, because without referring to government statistical information on this, I think you can make some kind of unsupported claims about the numbers that are likely.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Any further comment from member council?
I don't believe there's any provision for parking of cycles in the plan.
Chair, I don't have a diagram which shows cycle parking. I think it would be difficult to say that that's an aspect of the application which can't be dealt with by condition. As a semi-detached house, clearly there is space to put cycles on the site, and I think an inspector would automatically say that's something which should have been controlled by condition.
We can go to the vote on the recommendation in the first instance, which is on page 105, which is the recommendation is to approve. So can I have a vote on all those in favour of approving this application? No. Can I have a vote on all those who are against this application?
Yes. The amended
Yeah.
one.
Not against, just
no,
against.
Yeah.
Unanimous against, Chair.
Okay, as I understand it, we now need another vote on the reasons for refusal, is that correct? So if we could decide, are we going to include 2 reasons of parking as well as the...
Because the massive as well.
Okay.
Chair, do you want to vote on them separately?
That would be a good idea, yes.
Yeah.
So if we can vote first on refusal under Local Plan 3.4, if we could have a vote on that, please.
Do you want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
Because of the additional massing created by this proposal, the resulting building would respond poorly to the existing features of local character and be poorly integrated into the immediate locality, contrary to policy 3.4 of the local plan.
Can we have a vote then, please, on that first refusal?
Unanimous, Chair.
And can we then now have a vote on the second reasons for refusal, which were the parking? Have you got a form of words that you can suggest for us?
The application does not provide appropriate car parking space on site, contrary to policies 3.14 and 8.10 of the local plan.
Will we please have a vote on that second reason for refusal?
Six, Chair.
And those against? No, okay. Any abstentions or something?
So the fact is, it's been approved on a bigger scale, and we've put in a smaller application to regularise the situation. So I'll leave that with you guys to roll over. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.